All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our very first session of Santa Rosa Zine Fest 2022. The Sonoma County Library is thrilled to be able to partner again with the Santa Rosa Zine Collective to bring you this event. My name is Tara. I'm a teen services librarian at the Roanoke Park Cotati Library. I'm joined by my colleague Zaida. Our other colleague, Serena, helped us to organize this, and she's not able to make it to this session, but you'll see her at sessions to come. And then I'd also love to introduce Santa Rosa Zine Collective, Chelsea, Mare, and Melissa. Absolutely amazing community collective of artists and activists, and we have been so inspired to be able to work with them for the second year. We put on the first Santa Rosa Zine Fest in 2020, completely virtually. And it was an amazing experience, but we're very excited to be back to be able to bring you a bigger, even more exciting lineup this year. So we have a whole week of virtual events going on, and then it will culminate in an outdoor in-person event on Saturday, March 26th at the Northwest Regional Library in Santa Rosa. So we're very, very excited about all the events. We hope that you'll join us for other sessions. You can see those and register at sonomalibrary.org/ZineFest 2022. And before we get started with our session today, I'd just like to talk about a couple of Zoom details really quickly. So first of all, if you have questions, if you can please use the Q&A function that you should see at the bottom of your screen. We'll have some time at the end for our panelists to address those questions. We would love it if you'd also use the chat, to respond and interact and engage. But if you ask questions in there, they may get lost and we might not be able to respond to them. So do use the Q&A for questions. So this session is being recorded and it will be posted to YouTube within the next couple of days. So now I am very happy to turn things over to Chelsea from Santa Rosa Zine Collective to introduce our amazing panelists.
Thank you so much, Tara. Yeah, this has been such a labor of love getting going in our second year. And it's such an honor and humbling experience to start off our second year of Zine Fest and to start it off with this particular panel of people. I'm really thrilled to bring them together in conversation, and they are all meeting for the first time or met for the first time today online. So I think there's going to be just a really fascinating and inspiring conversation to unfold on the topic of seeking liberation through art. I'm going to introduce all three of these panelists and bring them out for our conversation. So you are going to hear today from Desi Fontenot. Desi is a board member of Shelterwood Collective, a newly founded Black, Indigenous, and LGBTQ-led community forest and retreat center located on unceded Kashaya land and Southern Pomo territory in Cazadero, California. Shelterwood is planting the seeds for a QT-POC-centered artist residency program. Desiree is also co-director of Movement Generation, Justice and Ecology Project, where she engages hundreds of organizations, cultural workers, and change agents through intensive justice and ecology retreats, cultural productions, and regional land justice movement building. As a queer Black organizer, farmer, and grassroots ecologist, Desiree's work is focused on liberating land and queering ecological education. Our next panelist is Rima Makaryan. Rima is an artist based in Santa Rosa whose work primarily uses art as a tool to tell stories and humanize marginalized groups, whether they are undocumented immigrants or refugees from Armenia. She hopes to bring hope and inspiration to our communities through publicly accessible artwork and plant seeds of change in the hearts of those who experience her art. She's currently a sophomore at Stanford University studying architectural design. And our third panelist today is Casper Cendre, who is the co-founder of ABO Comix, an abolitionist publishing collective dedicated to amplifying the voices of incarcerated LGBTQ people through artistic expression. Casper has over a decade of experience working with individuals navigating the justice system and facilitates community building across prison walls through publishing, one-on-one correspondence with prisoners, submission opportunities, and advocacy work. Since 2017, ABO Comix has donated over $70,000 directly to the commissary accounts and families of incarcerated LGBTQ prisoners, published over 30 graphic novels, books, and zines by queer inmates, and built a network of hundreds of free world allies and incarcerated artists. Using the DIY ideology of punk zine culture, ABO was formed with the philosophy of mutual support, community, and friendship. Welcome all today. It's so good to see you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. Hey, everyone out there. It's always a little weird not to see the audience, but thanks for joining.
Beyond the introduction,
Thank you so much.
sorry. Beyond the introductions that we just shared about you all, I'd love for you to talk a bit more about how you got started with your respective projects. You've all been on your activism paths for a while now and started young. We'll go to Casper first, then Rima, then Desiree.
Hi, everybody. I'm Casper. Thank you so much for having me here today to chat. I'm really excited to get to be in conversation with you all. A little bit about ABO Comix. We've been around since 2017. We got our start in Oakland, California. I was with a couple of my friends who were really big in the comic zine making world. I had been doing prisoner advocacy work for about a decade already. I had been really involved with an organization called Black and Pink and was on the leadership team for them. And their mission is to help connect incarcerated LGBT people with free world pen pals. And so after doing a ton of work with them, I had been pen paling with a ton of people inside prison. A lot of them were artists. So they were sending me really unique, really beautiful pieces of art. Over time, they asked if I could even try and help them sell their artwork to try and get some commissary funds or funds for their families and stuff like that. So in 2017, my friends and I had the idea to try and bridge sort of the two worlds of like the comic zine making world, which is really big in the Bay Area, and the world of prisoner advocacy. So we put together a compilation of comics by queer, trans, and HIV positive artists inside prison. That was called ABO Comics, A Queer Prisoners Anthology, Volume 1. Now we're here in our 5th year, so we've done this annually every year. We put together this compilation in December each year, and then throw this giant party to try and accumulate a bunch of funds to send to people for the holidays or to send to their families for the holidays. We've branched out into a ton of different things over the years. So we now work with individual artists in prison to help publish their graphic novels, poetry books, memoirs, autobiographies, research manuscripts, like anything they want to publish. We're trying to work with as many artists as we can to help them get their artwork out there into the world. We routinely hold art shows or work with other people to hold art shows to try and showcase all the fine art that we've collected and help sell that for commissary funds. We are launching into the podcast realm finally, which has been a big endeavor. So in June, we're launching for Pride Month, the first season of a podcast featuring long form interviews with currently incarcerated artists. And then on the back end, we do a ton of advocacy work for all of the artists that we work with. So we help file grievances. If people need help with things in prison, we help connect people with legal counsel, medical help inside the prison. Basically, like anything that people need that we can help with, we try and do. And then we are also just facilitating community building to the best of our ability. So we collaborate with hundreds of people inside. We try and build community that way and keep everybody kind of involved together. So that's a little bit about what we do. Thank you so much again for having me, and I'm excited to talk to y'all.
We are thrilled to have you. Thank you so much, Casper. Desi, I'd love for you to introduce, I'm sorry, I said I was going to go to Rima second. Rima, I will go to you second. And I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us about how you got started on your path.
Sure. So again, my name is Rima Makaryan. I'd love to share some more about the work that I've done, and I am going to share my screen with you all, if that works. We'll see. While I'm figuring this out, essentially, I started the Monarch project when I was a sophomore or a junior in high school. And you know, it came from a place of almost frustration, because I was trying really hard to connect with people and to help them understand this message about kind of the injustices that were taking place in the immigration system. I had gone into high school just as Trump had become president. And, you know, as someone who had always wanted to make a difference in the world, I felt like, okay, it's my time to do it as an immigrant myself, to step up and really make a difference when it came to something like DACA, which I think hit close to home to a lot of people my age because it affected a lot of youth. And so, you know, after trying posters, letters, all kinds of other methods of trying to reach people, I eventually, you know, resorted to art. And so I came up with this idea of doing this like giant mural at my school, and, you know, involving everyone and having it be about immigration, but in a very like subtle way that I thought would really connect with people. And so that's how it all kind of started to be. I made something called the Dreamer Mural. And so I can share that right now. I'm gonna do share screen. One moment. No, that's not what I meant to do. Sorry, 1 second. Slideshow. There we go. Once it loads. So this was that mural. It was kind of about this concept of dreaming, and something that I felt like everyone could relate to, but it also had very deep you know, political undertones to it. And I wanted people to understand that, but also approach it in a very warm and welcoming way, because so much of the political conversation at the time was very toxic. And so an accident that took place, you know, while I was doing this was how closely people connected to the monarch butterflies that I had as a part of this mural. And that's how the organization essentially got its name. You know, I kept working with the monarchs, and then we started putting them up all over Sonoma County. And so this is kind of like a map of some of the places we initially had them. So all over Sonoma County, and each of them told the story of an immigrant. And so using this idea of connecting to people through art and calling in instead of calling out, you know, we started to take over the entire area and just kind of expanded our themes, expanded our subject matter, but all kind of coming back to the innocence and the beauty of the monarch butterfly, which is why, you know, I've kept that name regardless of what theme we've taken on. You know, this is something in downtown Santa Rosa for a while, and then it was moved to the mall. I'll keep clicking through. And then we have this on 4th Street, which is still there. You're welcome to check it out, which kind of told the story of multiple, you know, different groups of people in Sonoma County. And you kind of had the core of the history at the very center, and then coming out and then joining the real world at the end. As you might be able to see, there's like butterflies escaping from the mural at the very end. So it's all very community focused. Each of these projects really involved a huge group of people working on them all together. That'll be more apparent in some of the other slides. It was about like people walking by and be like, hey, come on, jump on in, grab a paintbrush and get to work. And so it really was like people being able to say that that is my butterfly over there. I left my mark right over here, and really feeling invested in the community. And so that's kind of the core of the Monarch project, and how we came to be. And I think this is one of my favorite photos of all time, because I mean, you can really see how involved the community is in bringing up art and sharing it with the world. And it was something that, you know, they themselves were able to design. So a lot of the students here, I'll put it on the next slide, these core group students, they worked with me to tell me what they wanted to be expressed through this mural. And so we really worked together with community members to try to be a voice, like a visual voice for them, to tell their own stories and have it be something that's huge and loud and takes up all kinds of space. And so that's what the Monarch project is about. You know, we've taken on all kinds of themes and discussed all kinds of topics, you know, starting with the core of immigration and thinking about how intersectional that is, and eventually reached all kinds of communities and things like that. And so we have so much more coming up. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for having me.
Such an honor to have you. Thank you, Rima. And we'll go to Desi. And Desi, I would love when you introduce yourself to also take a moment and touch on what it means to queer ecological education and what queer eco-justice is about. But I'll let you start wherever you want with sharing who you are and what you do.
Cool, thank you. And thank you, Rima, for sharing the visuals. I feel like really juiced and inspired seeing the mural projects. It's like super dope. So just like leaning on that. My name is Desi, or Desiree, and I am privileged to be on the board of Shelterwood Collective, which is a fairly newly formed within the last year Black, Indigenous, and queer and trans-led retreat and healing center, which is located in Casadero, California, on 900 acres, which is wild. It's a former summer camp, so there's about 20 acres of developed land, and Shelterwood is basically joining a really beautiful network of BIPOC-led land return projects that are popping up and seeding all over the country. And it is, we're very much like in the brewing foundations of what the projects will become, but it joins a long legacy of creating queer sanctuary space, creating spaces for collective care, healing events, and particularly focusing on restoring our relationship with land and place. Two co-founders, Nico, I saw your shout out, Claire, thanks for coming, is an amazing queer Black forester. So a lot of our focus activities now are around what forest and fire resilient activities we need to do to be in relationship with the land in the long term and now. And then the other co-founder, Lael, who's a close friend of mine who used to work with me at Movement Generation, which is my primary organization, is an amazing Yaqui cultural worker, organizer, just lovely, poetic, wonderful person who is enmeshed in many Bay Area artist worlds. If they could be here today, they would leave to share more about that. But they're our two co-founders, and I'm on the board along with two wonderful folks. So we are at the beginning stages of this project. And the way I came into this work is I have been enmeshed in land justice work for over a decade now. I actually started out doing a lot of queer and trans organizing work. That was my initial student organizing work like 15 years ago. And then I came into farming like in my mid-20s. I'm 36, shout me out. And I worked at a land trust for a while, worked at several farms. And in 2016, I co-founded this queer eco-justice project with a friend of mine named Vanessa. And we started teasing out, learning, discussing, and having inquiries together around the relationships between climate justice and queer liberation, and thinking through various buckets of what that work has looked like. So we made a zine about it, and that's sort of our beginning in a lot of ways, and how I got connected with Movement Generation, because Vanessa and I started doing workshops after our course around what queer ecological intersections we're noticing, what's already been written about, and like where we see evolving the politic and thinking around queer and trans folks being on the front lines of climate disaster, and what does that mean for our resilience into the future, and also thinking about gender, sexuality, and biocultural diversity is a really interesting place. And I found it's been a great gateway for many people to fall in love with ecology in a different way and think bioregionally in a different way. One of the things I do, I was trying to do a screen share, but I think something's up with my Zoom, so it's not going to let me do it. But as part of my like queer ecology introductory pieces, that we always do a little bit of a queer ecology quiz where I personify a creature and folks guess what kind of creature I am. So I'll be like, I have 36,000 different documented sexes. Who am I? And folks are like, anyone want to guess? It's fungi. So there's like that bucket of work. And then there's thinking about queer geographies, right? Like, when did queerness become synonymous with urban? How are those histories entangled? What are the histories of queer and trans folks creating home and sanctuary and rural and wild spaces? And then on the climate justice tip, like what are the histories and stories of queer resilience? So that Queer Eco Justice Project, I share the link. We made this film a little while ago called Fire and Flood, which actually interviewed a lot of folks based in and around Santa Rosa and Sonoma County after the 2017 fires, and a lot of folks based in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, and weaving together stories of resilience and reflection. So that's a little taste of things. And I'm sure we'll get to jump in more as we open the conversation, but that's me and a little bit about Shelterwood.
Thank you so much for that introduction to your work, Desiree, and to you. Liberation as a goal comes through really strongly in all of your respective work and what you're dedicating your lives to. So I would love for you to share about like who are the people and communities that you seek to liberate, and what does liberation through art mean to you? I'll let anyone jump in.
I can jump in if that's cool with everybody. So for us working with incarcerated people, it's kind of the obvious focus of we're working towards real physical liberation of folks who are confined in, a very small cell day by day, but we're also working towards that sort of artistic liberation of healing and transformative justice. In prison, a lot of times surroundings are very bleak. A lot of prisons are placed into more rural environments where there's not a pretty view out the window. There's not much to see other than brick and barbed wire, and it's sort of that monotonous routine day in and day out. So a lot of people find real healing through an artistic practice. We've worked with a lot of artists who have never before created a piece of art in their entire lives, and they're trying something for the very first time. And I've had the privilege of seeing the impact that can have on a human life who is confined to a very small, very bleak environment, in that channeling energy and channeling emotion, and a lot of times channeling trauma into some sort of artistic practice, no matter what it is. Like, our primary focus is graphic novel making, comic making, but we get to work with artists of all types and all mediums. So whether people channel their feelings into making a zine with stick figures for the first time, whether they're trying poetry for the first time, whether they're trying to make music for the first time, getting to see the impact that has on people to really process everything that they've been through to learn about themselves and to develop really healthy practices has been an incredible thing that I've gotten to watch for so many people who are incarcerated over the past 5 years. So to me, you know, unfortunately, we can't always get everybody out of prison right now. That's what we're working towards, the ultimate goal. But working with people while they are incarcerated to help develop these sorts of liberation practices where they can escape in some ways through artwork. So that's my little tidbit there.
I can jump in next. Casper, you talked about a lot about like physical liberation and like escaping out of walls and you know, that kind of like very like visual, literal take on liberation. And I think that is, you know, kind of where, you know, I started when it comes to liberation, thinking about like walls and borders and why we chose, you know, a winged creature to represent as, you know, something like a butterfly. So I think initially a lot of it was about kind of helping undocumented folks genuinely feel free, or especially helping like the youth. I think as someone who started this in high school and I'm still, you know, like 19 years old, a lot of my work is focused on youth because I feel like that's who I can connect with the most, and that's who I feel like we need to really be ready to jump in as soon as they can, and, you know, really take the torch. So there's that piece of it. And then, you know, we talk about like transformation and kind of the imagery of like a chrysalis and then, you know, the caterpillar and the butterfly and all of that. So it's a lot of the other part of it is like such on a personal level. And, you know, it ties into public art being something that, well, it's in the name, it's public. So it's hard for me to choose an audience when it comes to talking about like, who do I want to liberate? You know, it's about whoever gets to view my art. And that's why, you know, what I really love about public art and the fact that, you know, anyone can see it. And so it's almost like planting the seeds of liberation in the people who see it, kind of inspiring them to look at things in a different way or free their minds from preconceived notions. And then, you know, like in terms of representation, I think there's so much liberation that comes out of seeing yourself represented in something and feeling like, okay, if this woman with really hairy arms and a big nose is, you know, on a mural, well, then maybe I can be cool and I can be powerful too. And so a lot of it is focused on helping people see themselves be glorified on a giant wall and really feel free and feel like they can take up space and that they matter and that they're beautiful. So, you know, like Casper said, a lot of it is about like physical liberation. And then there's also so much more, like if you just dig into the layers, you know, the whole like on a very personal level that everyone can relate to, regardless of, you know, what group they belong to.
Yeah, feeling both of the shares that y'all had. I think, yeah, for me, one of the phrases we talk about a lot with movement generation in our just transition framework is, if it's not soulful, it's not strategic. And I think for me, that kind of like gets at the gut of why art and cultural strategy are so important. It's just like the idea that like people can't go somewhere where they already have been in their minds, and like art is the vehicle to take us there. Like a friend of mine says, like, culture moves so much faster than politics, and the visions we create, the imaginations we put out there, it's not just like a narrative intervention, but it's also like it's also a healing process. It's also cultural revitalization. To me, it's everything. Like, I think we can't have the transformation we seek without making it irresistible. And art is the way that we do that, right? It's the way that like we make it feel so good to get free that we can't not do it. And something I didn't share in my introduction, one of the visions for Shelterwood is to start an artist residency program that centers cutie BIPOC folks. And as far as I know, there's not really a lot of places doing that, and a lot of places cutie BIPOC artists can go and cultivate a sense of safety and care in a rural place to create art and create space. So I think another big thing is like, how do we nurture the artist in all of us, and folks whose center life goal, purpose, and calling is to create art. And I think having residencies and extended time and space for people to create in the way that they want to is super important. Because yeah, it's really like the forefront of what it means to create change. It's that like pulling us into an irresistible vision, and also a way for us to process all of the trauma and the grief and complexity that we're swimming in every day, right? It's like liberation, full of contradictions, and art's a throughway in a lot of ways, in my view.
Desiree, I love like the, the irresistibility. I just love that phrase in general. To make something so beautiful and attractive, you have no choice but to take it. And that's something wonderful. It's not like taking someone into a bad direction, but it's just like making, the changes that we want to see feel real and feel beautiful. But I have a question for, I guess, both Casper and Desiree. I mean, you talked a lot about like, the artist and everyone, and I wonder I don't know if this is a question or more of a prompt, like the line between the artist and the viewer, right? The consumer of the artwork and the person who's making it. Like, what do you think about that line? Is that line that something that exists, or is it something that kind of is fabricated to keep people from feeling like they can also participate in the culture of art and kind of what it gives us? So I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
I think that's a really interesting question, and I actually was thinking about that as I was listening to you both speak. I've seen a lot of kind of sort of gatekeeping in the art world, where sometimes people are scared to delve into it because they think, oh, I can't draw, I can't write, I don't have a background in that, like why, I'm going to leave that to the artist, sort of thing. And I think there's something really beautiful about having people step outside of their comfort zone and try something new for the first time. That's something I've gotten to see a whole lot over the last 5 years, is people who are like, I don't think I can do this. And, getting the chance to be like, you could try, just, try it. And then people falling in love with creating art, because there's something really intrinsic about that appeals to sort of like our primal brains, I think, where art has been around as long as humans have been around. So it's really ingrained in us. And I think it's something that everybody should try, whether or not it comes out being as beautiful as the Monarch murals, or it's just stick figures on a page, for the first time. There's something so beautiful about putting human emotion into the physical realm. And I think everybody should definitely give it the chance, because I've seen so many people fall in love with it, people who never considered themselves artists to begin with, develop an artistic practice, and now become, world-renowned, famous artists who have art shows and stuff just from taking the chance and trying something new for the first time.
And what your question brought up for me is like, it's with all of our mainstream culture and like the slew of content that gets thrown at us, it's hard not to have that like consumer relationship with art. And I think something that feels really special about community-based, community-driven art is the invitation can be different than a lot of the mainstream popular stuff that gets thrown at us from every angle. Is that like, what is the invitation of looking and interacting and engaging with a project like yours, with the zines or the comics that you're helping come out of, be seen in the free world, Casper? Like, how are folks being invited to engage and look differently in these projects that aren't tied to like, these huge corporate eyes on the screen algorithms that we're, engaging with all the time? So I think there's an opportunity that's different. And of course, everyone will engage with something differently. That's like part of this, the way of being human and subjective and objective seeing and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I think I completely forgot about that second part of that question there, where it's like, I think in a lot of ways, art is for the artist. If you're not making the art for yourself, then I don't think you're starting from the right place. Like you got to put yourself in the artwork. But then I think once it's like you've completed the project, I think then the art kind of becomes for the world. It's like you've got to start with the personal. You have to express what you're really feeling. And then for me, I feel like when I create something, it's like I have to do it for myself. But then once it's done and it's out there in the world, then it belongs to the world now. And it's a community sort of art field. I know, I don't know how, I guess, every other artist in the world feels. Obviously I can only speak for myself, but yeah, I think the art for me at least always has to start with the personal, and then you just share it with everyone, and if people like it, then they like it, and if they find meaning in it, then that's wonderful, and if not, then you did something nice for yourself.
I wanted to ask each of you, what's something that has come up in your journey with your activism and your art? What's something that's come up that's like taken you by surprise as an element of the work that you do? This question is kind of coming from, I'm thinking back to a conversation that I had with Casper where you talked about like mentorship of some of the incarcerated artists that you're working with, and how there are or were some people affiliated with ABO who basically started like kind of doing workshops with some of the people who were getting started and wanting some guidance or like editing of their work. That doesn't have to be where you take the answer, but it's a question for everyone, and just kind of the example that was in my head.
I suppose I could start on this one. Yes, things that are surprising. I learn something new every single day doing this work. I feel like I came into the prisoner advocacy realm with a series of misconceptions. What I thought I knew about people living in prison ended up being completely wrong after I started talking with hundreds of people. My advocacy was really guided around sort of academic prison abolitionists kind of literature. It was very, very heavily grounded in sort of that like academic jargon that tends to go over the heads of people. It was very kind of elitist. And then after I spent years and years actually engaging with people through letter writing and through phone calls and prison visits and stuff, it really turned my entire world upside down. But I feel like it really brought me so much closer to the incarcerated community for real, and it made it less abstract. So I think it's definitely important always to remember that if we're doing advocacy work, we can't do it without the people who are experiencing those sorts of things. I find a lot of times in advocacy work, in prison abolition work especially, it's a lot of advocacy on behalf of somebody else that you don't even have their input. And a lot of that comes down to like the logistics. Like it's really hard to communicate across prison walls and the prison barriers. They put a lot of obstacles in your way to be able to stop you from communicating directly with the people inside. But I think we always have to center the voices of the people who are experiencing that and really ask them, well, what do you need? What do you need to see? How can I best be of assistance in that? And then always take their viewpoints into account with whatever steps we're taking.
I don't know if I can speak to the first question in particular, but I feel like, I mean, every single day I get surprised by something different. But to speak to what Casper was talking about, kind of asking first, I think that is something that a lot of activists learn after going into it. I think everyone comes in with like really good intentions about helping, helping the world, let's make it better, without really speaking to the people that are being affected. And so I think that was the case for me perhaps most when, I didn't mention this earlier, but I did Monarch project stuff in Armenia as well. And even though I am Armenian and was born there, like there was definitely a disconnect. And I had like this big grand plan about what I was gonna do going in, and then you show up and then you talk to them and they want something different. Now in this case, I thought art was gonna be useless to people who were facing like much bigger problems, but what caught me with surprise was, I guess, like literally the amount of joy that a mural brought to a community. And I think even though I went into this like thinking that art was a powerful force, I think what was surprising to me was like the kind of immediate effects that you get from someone seeing something gorgeous pop up on their wall. So it's almost like the tangible effect that art can have on the community, which was really surprising. But yeah, I mean, I think, asking people what they want is like the number one thing that has to happen. And, back in Sonoma County, I did a lot of portraits of different people. And, you're really telling someone else's story, you're representing someone else. So, so much research has to go into representing the communities you're representing. Like if I'm telling the story of an immigrant, if I'm telling the story of a Native American woman, like I have to know so much about them and work insanely close and have them be there at every step of the way. Instead of me channeling my preconceived notions about what I think their story is like, or what I think they want, or what they think they need. I think artists, a lot of times, if they're not telling their own story, I mean, it has to, you really have to be almost like a form of translation to convey what they want. And I mean, of course, that has to be grounded in you connecting with the art itself, like Casper was talking about, and making sure that it also speaks to you. So I think it's a really interesting like balance between, making sure that you're staying true to yourself, but also properly representing, groups that you don't belong to. I don't know if that was totally off topic, but that's just what Casper's message reminded me of and I wanted to share.
That sounded right on to me. I really appreciate y'all hearing that, and just like the amount of integrity and care that your storytelling just brought up for me. So appreciate that. I don't really have much to add. I think when you initially asked the question of like what has surprised me, my mind went to a couple of queer ecology workshops I've done, where at the end someone comes up to me and is just like, what you just shared with me is going to change my relationship with my grandkid. Like I realize I have been like policing their gender in a way so intensely, and just hearing about like like just, I don't know, it could be something like just like how most fish are change sex at one point in their life, or are sequentially, or every flower is in the sequential way, or simultaneously having both pollen and fruit producing parts, and just like opening up like language of like how we observe and think about the world in ways that we haven't been allowed to. Like I'm always surprised like who like comes back later and it's just like still sort of in that like, wow, diversity assures resilience in living systems. I really understand that now in a different way. So it always surprises me like how that awe really comes out in people in having that conversation and in observing One of my like favorite art forms is making bouquets. Like I just find it incredibly relaxing. I love growing flowers. I wasn't a big flower person before starting to grow my own food, and I was like, oh, flowers. But now I'm like, ooh, flowers. I love them so much. And one of the activities I like to do with folks is talk about the more relational naming systems that Indigenous folks around the world have to different plants. So like a flower could be named more about like its relationship to you, or its morphology, or if its color, shape. It's not just some Latin name slapped on it that doesn't really have anything to do with like how it is in relationship. So going through each flower with folks that is just like a very sweet activity that I find helps ground and kind of move folks into that awe in a different way. But yeah, that's where my thoughts went for that question.
We have a really lovely question from Henry Inman in the chat, and I'm going to ask it, but I'm going to ask it to everyone, but I'm going to start with Rima in order to give Desi and Casper a moment. I'm just like looking at some of the collections behind you, Casper, and I would love for folks in the audience to see some of the visuals. So I'd love to give you a little bit of time to like either get something ready to screen share a bit of the work of ABO Comics, or you can literally just hold up the books behind you if that's easier. And similarly, Desi, I know you said you were having some Zoom trouble, but I'd love for you to like bring us any of the visuals, including if you just want to chat me a link, I can screen share for you. Henry's question is, how did you find your art community? And they say, I often feel like my practice is very solitary. I follow artists who inspire me on social media, but that feels distant as well.
I think for visual artists, that's kind of our biggest problem. I think so many other art practices are so much more collaborative, like inherently, like music, you can make it on your own, but you know, the concept of a band is a lot more common than, you know, a bunch of like visual artists making a single piece together. So I think for me, I mean, it mostly happened through, you know, the projects that I did, like hosting public art projects, and then, you know, those people kind of found their way over to me. So I think it's almost like an openness and an invitation to collaborate. I think social media is a wonderful tool. So instead of like just following people, be like, hey, I'm hosting a paint and watch a TV show event at my house. And you know, you can come over or something like that. Like I think it takes a lot more of an active effort to like connect with visual artists because so much of our work is solitary. And yeah, I'd say social media is probably your best tool. But you just have to be kind of more open with your invitation and like really take initiative and getting people to come together. And then collaborative visual art projects, I think, you know, should happen more. I think it's a format that works really well, as long as, you know, you don't have too many artists with giant egos. It works out. So you just got to kind of be open to working with other visual artists and creating something together, and then just really being out there, being like, hey, I'm doing this. Everyone is welcome. Please show up. And then, you know, you just make friends naturally that way. Or just show up to one of my paint days. I promise you will meet a ton of people.
On that note, and before Casper or Desi jump in to share about how they've found our community, do you want to drop in the chat how people can follow you to find out? I've seen you put out a lot of calls, Rima, for artists to come and pick up a brush.
Sure. So we have an application out at the moment for new artists to join us, and like I'm taking people with all kinds of experience. It just depends on like, you know, where you're gonna fall based on the kind of help that we need. So right now I have like 5 junior leads working with me, and they're like all high school age students, and then we've had like people up to the age of like 45 apply, and you know, and so on and so forth. So it's really open to everyone. Let me just pull it up really quickly. 1 second. I can also drop it in the chat while they're talking so I don't take up too much time.
That sounds perfect. Thank you.
I think I've got it. So let's drop it in the chat. And this is the application to the Monarch project. And if you just follow the Instagram, which I will also add, I have open calls for anyone really. So you don't have to be like apply to this to be a part of our projects. Really, literally anyone can drop by, and then I'll have a ton more projects happening in the summer and then perhaps in the spring, but like summer is our main time to do stuff just because of the weather. But yeah, you'll see calls out on our Instagram all the time. Okay, and then if Casper and Desiree want to take it away.
Okay, I guess I could do a little bit of show and tell here with some of the art pieces that I just have like directly behind me. We, of course, again, work with artists who do all different mediums, but I think our primary goal is really just to like foster community between all of our artists in prison, and that gets difficult to do because they obviously can't really engage with each other too well. A lot of prisons don't allow prisoners to correspond with people in other other prisons. So I want to share this really cool piece of artwork. It's actually backwards. I think my thing is mirrored, but this is by one of our artists, Gabriella Wyatt, who put together every single character from our graphic novel anthologies. So every artist tells a story in the anthology. It's usually a personal story, an autobiographical story in a graphic novel scene. And so this showcases like every single character in the graphic novels. And then this was a way to kind of bring everybody who submitted a comic to us together in one art piece. So this was really exciting to get to send out to all of our artists inside so that they could feel like they are, you know, all kind of in this single place together. So I wanted to share that one. We also have some really incredible hummingbird necklaces that are made by our friend Joanna Nixon. She's a trans woman incarcerated here in California. We're doing a ton of fundraising for her for like gender affirming items, and she's having surgery soon. So we're just trying to do a ton of fundraising for recovery stuff for her. So we've got a bunch of those that we're working on selling. And then I just wanted to share a little bit about like some of the individual artists that we work with and sort of like the diverse art styles that they bring. This one, the Anthology of an Artist, is by our friend Krista Morningstar. She showcases her various alter egos in this book through like a manga style. It goes through basically like her autobiographical story. Everything we've ever published by her is in here. A bunch of new stuff is in here. She is such a fascinating creature. She's had multiple near-death experiences that she goes through in this book, about finding love in prison, about finding meaning, developing an artistic practice. So yeah, that manga style art is hers. We also have Harold Lee, who is one of our artists who does like the Sunday Funnies style comics, where they're very simple, and each is generally like a one-panel comic that tells generally like a funny little anecdote. He's kind of known as like the jokester, the practical joker in his prison. So he just tries to like lighten the mood and tell funny little stories like that. We also worked with our friend Sir Brian to tell his autobiography. This one is actually one of the first like texts that we actually worked on. So it's not really a graphic novel, although it does have some super beautiful drawings in here by one of our other collaborators. This is about growing up as a young queer boy in a really homophobic environment. He was taken from his family at a young age and put into foster care. And so this is his autobiography. He also has a ton of things published with us. And then along with, just sort of like the diverse aspect of like everything we do, this is one of our anthologies. So each one showcases anywhere between 25 and 50 currently incarcerated artists, all sort of like autobiographical stories about their lives inside, or really anything they want to share. So we have, I don't know, thousands of pieces of artwork here at ABO Comics headquarters, and our doors are always open. We're always looking for more volunteers. If you're interested in art, if you're interested in prisoner advocacy, we could definitely use your help. So I always got to kind of throw that in because we're swamped with things. We get like 300 letters a week. So if anybody wants to come hang out with us and go through some artwork and help out, we'd love to have you.
Thank you so much, Casper. And I'll ask, yeah, we're being all brought back onto the screen. Desi, did you have any visuals that you would want to share right now?
Yeah, I was going to share a little bit about this creative wildfire project that Movement Generation did recently, actually with Lael is one of our core coordinators of that project, just as a like glimpse of some of the ways I can envision Shelterwood in the future, collaborating with artists, as we are a pretty new project. I was just like really feeling what you shared, Casper, and I was going to ask, where are the headquarters? Real quick before I lose that thought.
Yeah, we're in downtown Oakland. We're off 26th and Broadway at a building called Classic Cars West. We have an art gallery downstairs too, where we do a rotating art show. We were trying to do it every month, but currently we still have our holiday art show up, so we're a little behind. But yeah, you're welcome to stop by anytime. Oh, and I would love to talk to you about plants. I have a lot of plants that I don't know what I'm doing with.
Awesome. I love talking about plants. So here, let me see, I'll share this link and either folks could open it, you can click on it there, and I could just share a little bit about it. But at the, I don't want to say beginning of last year, Movement Generation, we collaborated with the Climate Justice Alliance, which is an awesome set of frontline organizations all over the world, all over the country, doing really dope work on energy, food, soil, and many other intersections, along with the New Economy Coalition, to center in on how do we want to bring artists together to take some of the visionary regenerative economy work that we're doing in different locales and channel it into some new and creative art forms. So there's about 20 artists across many mediums. If you keep scrolling down, Chelsea, you could see some of the pieces that were created. And if folks have some time, there's a awesome little artist showcase video with Lael and my homie Trey, who lives in Santa Rosa and used to work with the North Bay Organizing Project. So I don't know if folks on here know Trey, but Trey's the homie. And there's, lots of cool pieces and like just different medium and form. If you want to take a look at some of Jackie's artwork, if folks need some love and inspiration today. But the way this collaboration happened was very like open and free. Like the idea was to bring folks into a shared set of political strategy and analysis, and then just give artists the resources and the time that they wanted to create whatever came out of that illuminated some of the conversations and principles and strategies that the organizations in the Climate Justice Alliance are putting out there. So I really hope that we get to continue to create models like this, where we don't have these very siloed ways of thinking about our work, but we're actually more and more integrating what we think of as cultural strategy with the political strategy, advocacy, organizing work that we're doing. So Yeah, that's a little bit about Creative Wildfire. I wanted to share that, some visuals. Yeah, one of my favorite pieces in here is on grief. That's a small zine folks want to check out at another time. But yeah, more food for thought.
I'll stop sharing for the moment. Thank you for bringing that up. That was amazing. I can't wait to look more into this website. There's so much there. I have a question from Stephanie and a number of people, it looks like. This will be a question for Rima and Desi. What is one dream that you have for Sonoma County?
I'll let you start first, Rima.
I think, I mean, there's so much that can change, but I think something fundamental that I notice every day is like, I mean, Sonoma County is wine county, right? So much of our identity revolves around the wineries. And I think one thing that I think would change a lot of it would be talking about that system and who is really the backbone of that system. And talking about the migrant workers and, you know, making sure that their rights are protected, because they are the reason that Sonoma County is, you know, the thriving economy that it is. And that's just like a very, like almost like a hyper specific non-art related dream, but it's just, I think, an issue that is overlooked so often. And it's so fundamental to, you know, this community. And I think we need to talk about that. And, you know, there are real changes that need to happen to support the people that have created the communities and, you know, everything that we have in Sonoma County. It's really about the farm workers and their families, their identities, and not reducing them down to that I hate labels and titles and all of that. So that's my dream for Sonoma County, one of the many that I have.
Yeah, I definitely echo that deep shift in power relations. I think dream for Sonoma County is like a dream for the whole Bay Area and for how we reimagine everything in our relationship to land is, I think, encapsulated a lot in rematriation, which Segorte Land Trust, shout out to them. They're Oakland-based Ohlone women-led land trusts, returning land to Indigenous hands. And I think there's just this 100-year vision of like, what would it look like to rematriate land, meaning like have land back in Indigenous stewardship, and also thinking about how we shift our, like all within under that umbrella, the opportunities for shifting the way in which we all relate to place, the way in which existing power relations of land injustice take shape, particularly in farming communities where folks do not own their labor, and the profit and extraction from, you know, all of the big monocultures are happening, and how to disrupt that. And I think a through way is being in right relationship with First Peoples, and having commitments to be in right relationship takes a lot of time. And I think one dream is that folks lean into that. And I think art is a pathway through that, right? Because folks often think about, especially folks who are in positions of privilege and powers, of what they're giving up and not what they're gaining by moving towards a more equitable, just world. And I think one of the hopes I have is that we build that irresistibleness in what we're seeking to change, right? Where everyone can live the buen vivir, the good life. And we know that's possible, and at a scale and pace and intensity that the planet can withstand. So that's the dream. Sonoma County in the world. Yeah.
I got one question in the chat for Casper from Miriam, who says that right now they're keeping their art. They've just only ever kept their art for themselves. And Miriam wants to know how to move from the other stage that you talked about, where art is a means of sharing and connection with people.
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything wrong with keeping art for yourself. I think that that is wonderful. If you're creating art for yourself, then that's absolutely beautiful and you should do that. If you're interested in sharing it with your community, then that's absolutely beautiful too. I guess we're still trying to figure out how to get it out there onto the stage a whole lot more. We're working with a lot of artists to try and get their artwork not only published, but in art galleries, as some people are interested in NFTs, which is like a brand new market that blows my grandpa technology brain out of the water that I'm still trying to figure out. But I think the most like practical and the most meaningful for me has just been to go to like zine festivals or book fairs or things like that and share your art that way. We get tables a lot of the time at these sort of like book fairs, zine festival type things to share people's art, but you don't have to. Like you can bring your art to just like a public community event and talk to people about it. I've never before been to a festival or anything and people were not excited to talk about other people's artistic practices and what they do and what they create. So, you know, for me, I'm a major introvert. It's taken me a long time to get out of my shell and not be afraid of like, approaching somebody and starting a conversation. But we're all in community here together, especially if you go to an art type event, you know, like people are excited about art. So I think you just not being too scared to start up a conversation with somebody and just, you know, connect and build a network of artists and see if people are interested in collaborating on a project or something like that. You know, I'm sure there are a lot of people, even in this chat right now, who might be interested in working on projects together or sharing your art, sharing details about your practice. So yeah, if that's something that you're interested in, just kind of go to like a community event and start talking to people.
I have one last question that I want to ask the three of you. And then if you have a question for one another, I want to definitely make a bit of space for that. So my question is that you are all people who got started quite young, seemingly with so much focus like toward the path that you're on now. And I think there may be people who are in high school or even middle school in our audience. So with younger viewers in mind, I would love for you to talk about some of the resources that you accessed when you were getting your start, and some of the challenges that you faced as young people engaging in activism.
I can jump in. So, I mean, when I started doing this in high school, I think the biggest mistake that I made was trying to reinvent the wheel. And when you're really starting out, you just kind of want to, I don't know, you're unaware of the resources that are around you, the people who are already doing the work that you're doing or kind of have similar visions. So I think the first step is to make sure you're not wasting your time and trying to recreate something that already exists. And so you're not going to be able to find what is really unique and niche and like impactful about what you specifically want to do until you're familiar with what is around you. And Sonoma County especially is so rich in the resources it has to offer and the communities and the activist groups that exist already. So like I began with something called New Gen Peace Builders, and then I did something called the Junior Commission on Human Rights of Sonoma County, and then had all kind of clubs in high school and things like that. So I think the first step to really getting focus and starting out is to form a massive network of connections and resources, because that's what's going to make your work really, be impactful and function. You have to have a support network of people who are going to connect you to other people. And then it's just like an exponential kind of system where suddenly everyone in Sonoma County. So first, I would say, you know, go around, meet as many people as you can, join a bunch of different groups, even if they feel unrelated to yours. And then, you know, out of that, I think you will naturally find what is so special about what you want to do and how you can really fit it, like fill the gap in what is missing in the community. And I think that will make a successful project.
Yeah, I think that was perfect and sound advice. I had the same issue when I was starting out, which was like, I don't know where to channel my energy and to focus on. And I see so many issues, but I don't even know where to start. And I think starting from like addressing the issues and then trying to reinvent the wheel with a new solution is sort of instinctual, but it's almost counterproductive in that so many people are doing awesome, incredible work and they really could use your help. So like I started out just doing a ton of volunteer work in various different places. And then over time, I realized where I was most helpful and what I was most passionate about. And it was through volunteering at a bunch of different places and learning a ton of different skills and all the incredible things that people were doing. And people, you know, instinctually want to teach. I think we all want to help make our communities better. So it's like if we've got knowledge to share that might, you know, that somebody can take and run with and make something better, then I think most people are willing to teach that. So it's really just kind of dipping your toes into a lot of different areas and then finding what you're most passionate about. And like you just said, Rima, eventually you're gonna figure out where the holes are. You know, like there's this problem and so many people are working on all of these things, but I think maybe I can make a solution here and make this a little bit better. And then I think eventually that you're going to find both what you are extremely passionate about and what you are going to be able to do with the most impact.
Yeah, echo all of those things. I think for me, finding a mentor at a young age is like so helpful, like someone who you see maybe doing the type of work you want to do or has a lot of experience in a number of things. For me, that was the director of the Queer Center in my like very freshman year of college, just helping me see a lot of things and also to see the work, the places in my life where there already was like you're already engaged in struggle and activism in some way, like growing up in SoCal, in Black community and moving through a lot of white institutions and all of the code switching and policing and navigating that goes with that, and seeing like your life experience in relationship to the broader systems that you want to engage in disrupting and shifting in some way. I think like, you know, honoring what you're already bringing to the table and who you are and what you've come, you know, in the constant self-reflection piece too, right? So getting all the information and also just kind of knowing like getting a deeper sense of yourself too, really helpful. But yeah, it's a lifelong journey. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, right? Like I think we've all made plenty. So I think it's just being willing to dive in and to be okay with making mistakes and being okay with being held accountable too as well. Those mistakes as you grow into the work of culture shifting, world shifting, and all those things. Yeah.
Are there any burning questions that you have for one another that we didn't get to? We've got maybe 5 minutes or so before I need to turn it over to Tara and Mare to tell us about the rest of the week.
I have kind of a fun, silly question, which is, what has been one of your favorite comfort foods during the last 2 years of the pandemic? What nourishes you? Could be broad. Yeah.
I've been kind of delving a little bit into my my mom's heritage. She's an immigrant from Belgium, and I've only been there twice in my life, but every single time I went, I was just like completely in awe of the amount of love and care that they put into food and alcohol, of course, and chocolate. It's such a like a giant staple of Belgian culture, is just like, how do we make food the very best it could ever be, and then how do we bring everybody to the table at once? So I've been learning a little bit about how to make some Belgian dishes, some of which are so ridiculously difficult to make. Like, they'll take endive and cover it in ham and cheese, and I never realized that that would be as difficult to do perfectly as it is. But I've been trying to make that during the pandemic, so, along with like fries and mussels and all sorts of like Belgian staples.
I don't know. I love food so much. I don't know if one stands out to me in particular, but I like so much of my memories of COVID involve like being outside with friends and, painting until 3 o'clock in the morning. And so what we would do in between then was there would always be like a bunch of food trucks parked right outside. And so I remember this because it happened again today, where we just got like a bunch of tacos. And that just has been a ritual of ours that we've had. And then also just like all kinds of really delicious food from those places. I had like the most phenomenal like shrimp quesadillas the other day. I don't know. I think that for some reason is very closely associated with the pandemic for me. So yeah. What about you, Desiree?
So I'm originally from Louisiana, so anything with cayenne pepper on it has been my comfort food. I've made some gumbos, some jambalayas, experimented with some vegan jambalayas for my house, which is mostly vegetarian, but also the full traditional, all the things gumbo. So, yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thanks for the
I didn't know I was going to leave this panel so hungry. Casper, were you jumping in to share something?
Nope, I was just gonna say interesting question. Thanks, I'm starving now.
With that, I feel like I have a million more questions that I could ask all of you, and it's amazing how fast 80 minutes flies by. But I think we need to wrap up this conversation for now. I hope that this has opened new thought spaces for everyone listening, and that everyone is leaving with new ideas and inspiration for your own activism and your own paths to liberation through art. Please don't go yet, because I want to bring back in Tara Emerson from our library team to share about what's coming up at Zine Fest broadly and how you can get connected and registered for the events for the rest of the week. And then after that, we're going to turn it over to Mayor Morgan, who's part of Santa Rosa Zine Collective, and they are going to share with you all about what is specifically in store tomorrow online.
All right, thank you, Chelsea. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Casper, Rima, and Desiree. That was truly incredible conversation. So inspiring to hear about the art and the work that you're doing and the impact that it's having on our communities. I just feel so uplifted by this conversation, and it sounds like our attendees feel the same way. So it's really nice to hear that in the chat too. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I want to remind everyone that this is being recorded and will be put up on the library's YouTube channel within the next few days. I know that for myself, I want to revisit this conversation because there's just so much depth to it. So keep an eye for it there. If you have friends who missed it, let them know it'll be up there. As Chelsea said, we have a lot of other exciting events happening throughout the week. You can see the schedule of events and register at sonomalibrary.org/ZineFest 2022. So check out that link that I just put in the chat. We have virtual events throughout the week, and then our in-person outdoor event at the Northwest Library on Saturday. I'm just going to share my screen here, show you slides for some of our other coming up sessions. If Mare wants to jump in and talk about those, I can share the slides as you talk.
Sure, thank you. Yes, thank you so much for this incredible conversation. This was such a dream come true for us as the organizers to get all of you in conversation together. Tomorrow our digital event is really exciting, and I so wish I could be there in person. So we are having a discussion. Amanda Ayala, who's an incredible artist, an activist in the community, is doing a presentation about Indigenous bookbinding techniques and various works that she has done dealing with kind of what we in the Western art world would see as non-traditional means of binding, but are actually have this really lovely, rich tradition within various, specifically like South American traditions and art making and bookbinding. And that is also in conjunction and in conversation with Andrew Mecum, who is the newly appointed executive director of the North Bay Letterpress, which is an organization out of Sebastopol, California, that does a lot of letterpress and printing, and they have classes, and it's really great. He is going to be talking about sort of the Western means of printing and how that's done, whether it be letterpress or 3-color printing, screen printing, just sort of talking about, yeah, just the history of letterpress and what that is and how it actually is a lot more accessible than a lot of people give it credit for. And he will be doing his presentation actually from North Bay Letterpress. So he'll be able, you'll see through his section, the actual printing process and what that looks like, what their space looks like. So if you are like me and you like visually seeing where things are before you go, it'll be a wonderful introduction to that space and all of the amazing programming that Andrew is going to bring to that organization, and just kind of having him and Amanda in conversation with each other about various printing and binding techniques and how we make these things that are art objects, that are books. And so that's tomorrow. Both of those are tomorrow, which is very exciting. And then on Friday, we have Luis Blackgaller, who is an incredibly prolific artist. He will be doing his presentation in Spanish, which is wonderful. And it's basically, I believe it was like Zines as an adventure in self-publishing. So he's a very prolific self-published artist, as well as an incredible illustrator. He'll be doing a presentation all about that. Definitely great tie-in. That will also be recorded as well. Later on Friday, we're going to be having a zine social, an online zine social. So if you don't feel comfortable or are not able to make it to the in-person zine event on Saturday, this will be a spot to highlight your art, meet people virtually, share what you're interested in. You know, as this whole conversation has touched on, how do you get your art out there? How do you create community? This is a great way to start that process. If you're feeling uncomfortable, maybe in person or anything like that, it's a great way to get your to be part of that conversation and to get into the world of collaborating with people and doing really awesome stuff. And then of course on Saturday, we have our big crowning achievement, the in-person Zine Fest. We have a wonderful creator, Tara. They will be doing a live presentation at the Zine Fest at 2 p.m. About making zines, the art of making zines. They have been making zines for a very long time. They're a wonderful artist. They do multimedia stuff. So they will be just sort of, here's all of the crazy things you can do with zines. It's an endless possibility of things you can do. And they are a very out of the box artist, multimedia stuff. So we're very excited about that. And of course, at our in-person Zine Fest event, we will have artists, some speakers. We'll just have a wonderful array of folks. It's a great opportunity to come out and, after 2 years inside, come out and meet fellow artists in the community that are really committed to building community and making sure we all get out of our studios every so often and actually meet people in the world to make some change, create really cool, amazing projects that don't get created in a vacuum. They get created through community. So we are just so excited to have this event finally come to life after thinking that March of 2020 was going to be the, the time to make this happen. 2 years later, here we are. We're very excited about it. So we really hope that all of you guys are able to make it to the not just the virtual events. If you're in the area, we really hope that you come out and join us for the in-person Zine Fest at the Northwest Library. It's going to be a great afternoon of art and community building that we're very excited about.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And it's been just such a joy for the library to get to work with the Santa Rosa Zine Collective on this project. It's just been incredible, and we're so happy to be a part of it. So thank you all so much for attending today. We hope to see you all at our virtual sessions and to meet you in person as well. And just a huge thank you to everybody for being a part of this great conversation.
Yeah, an enormous gratitude to our collaborators in this work and to our guests today, Desiree, Casper, and Rima. You are truly inspirational.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hope to see you tomorrow.